the building. I want to inform the Zoning Board of Appeals that I am in the process of starting a Waverly Street overlay district from basically the Natick Town line all the way to Winter Street. And with that, during that study, obviously, we're going to be talking about height, different uses, maybe even different parking requirements, design requirements. But as far as this project goes, being right on the fringe of the CB district, I would recommend these conditions. And, just quickly going through them, we talked about, this project abuts Mary Dennison Park, and again, is outside. I would recommend that we put a height limitation from 4 to 5 stories. With these conditions, there should be plans that accompany these conditions so that I could review those plans, and I know that's going to take some time for the applicant, but that would be one condition. The floor area ratio obviously would be subject to review by the planning board. Number 4, the project has been downsized. The project with the 4 and 5 story height restriction, as well as the new parking requirement that the planning board just imposed. This project is now being proposed at 225 units. The project should be required to comply with our new parking standards. We've been issuing special permits. We just issued one on 380 Waverly Street, which was in the CB district. And what we found during the public hearings is that our parking requirement of a half a space per unit isn't working. So we recently made changes to our parking requirement, basically removing a half a space in requiring 2 spaces per 2-bedroom unit, which we feel is going to help some of the parking issues that have been raised by some of the neighbors during our public comment. Number 6 is a change in affordable housing. The council, I've been before the council several times regarding increasing our affordable housing component. Right now, we have an inclusionary housing component at 10%. The council took a major step along with the mayor in taking leadership and basically increasing the 10% to 11% at 80%, at 60% median income. And what that means is obviously more affordable housing units, but the housing that we need is workforce housing. The folks that, that work at these restaurants, the people that work in the downtown, and they can't find housing, they can't find affordable housing. So with this increase, it's going to help the city capture more affordable housing units for the next couple of years as these projects come in. Number seven is stormwater. And we would like the applicant to provide more stormwater at a higher standard than that's currently in our regulations. And that being that this, it affects Beaver Dam Brook, and we'd like to try to make them manage all the stormwater on their property. Again, that's going to require more engineering. Number 8 is Mary Dennison Park. To inform the board, the mayor is very close to signing a resolution to finally, have the Mary Dennison Park move towards a major cleanup. It's a $20 million to $25 million project. We're not only going to clean up the contaminated soil at this park, but we're actually going to build a new park. So we want, and we know that they've recognized this as a disposable site, but we want to make sure that that is covered and that the city is protected. Number 9, again, this is regarding to traffic and the signalization. I know GodMode has provided a traffic report. We know what has to be done out there. These signals in this stretch of corridor, it's one of the worst intersections in the city, but it needs new signalization, at a better, technology that can be provided today. There are ADA ramps and sidewalks that need improvement. So I would recommend this condition. And then lastly, design. This project is not in the CB district. That's why it's before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so this requirement would require the applicant to basically adhere to our design guidelines and regulations as set forth in the CB district. I think this project should be treated as though, if they want, they want it both ways, right? They want to be in the CB, but they're asking for these requests. It's important that this project be reviewed under those guidelines. Those guidelines and standards and regulations, took years to develop, and I would recommend that that be a condition. So those are the conditions. I know the plans, need to be reviewed again based on some of these conditions, but I wanted to provide this with the board tonight, and I thank you.
So with the conditions, the applicant is generally in line with numbers 1 to 6. Those, as you know, we got them today, so we're analyzing them, but 1 to 6 looking definitely in line with everything we're thinking about and talking with the director with. Number 7 and 9, we feel we need they're potentially premature in subjects that the planning board typically goes into. We will work on them, where to jump ahead. We understand that you likely will continue us to one further meeting. We need to have more work done on our civil plans. So during that time, we'd like to work with the director more on those 2 items. In particular, it's difficult with the stormwater without the engineering having been done, and also with contamination on the site, where the contamination changes the dynamics of recharging on site. So we'd like to probably have a condition more to the effect that there'd be best efforts contingent on suitable subsurface soil conditions. And I could have the engineer pipe in if you'd like. But on the number 8 with the environmental, that we're looking at the language, but in philosophically, that one seems fine. I touched on traffic. We're not sure that the planning board will want this to be the solution or not. It felt a little premature with traffic usually being in the purview of the planning board. Mr. Calicari is on this call, so if you wanted to discuss that more at this time, we could. And number 10, philosophically, also seems agreeable. We do need to evaluate it, but in general, the project was designed, in consultation with the CB requirements, so we don't expect that last item would be an issue.
I assume that you just got this afternoon, and we just got this afternoon, and some of us just got this.
Okay. I know I mentioned this previously, but I would really like to see some work with Seabra Foods. I would love it if they would be able to remain on that site, if that's what they want. I don't know if anyone's reached out to them and contacted them and found out if they do want to remain there, but I would really like it if they'd be able to stay in Framingham, and best would be if they could stay downtown. So I don't know if that's been addressed at all, but that's another one of my concerns.
Yes, Mr. Chair, regarding Seabra, I just want to let the board know I've reached out to Seabra Corporate, and I'm trying to work with them to find them a new location in the downtown. So I just wanted to get that back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Sarki, in this envisioned overlay district from Natick Line up to Winter Street on 135, is there a possibility that the height requirements might exceed 5 stories by any chance? And if that's a possibility, would there be any blowback by limitations to this project as it's kind of the start of this new overlay district? Are there any concerns there?
The height requirement in the CB district is 6 stories. However, if you look at our design guidelines, Rick, they show 5-story buildings. Why? I have no idea, but the concern that I've heard is that, do we want to have a wall of buildings as you go down Waverly Street? And they've been talking about a transition zone so that when you come into the town line, let's say you're at 3 or 4 stories, and then you gradually, when you get into the CB district, is where you go into the 6-story, the 6-story height. I see that as being more, residential. There's a residential neighborhoods behind further as you go east along Route 135. And then if you look outside the CB district going west, you really get into a residential neighborhood on one side of the street of Waverly Street. But this is going to take time. I'm in the process right now of doing some modeling so I can show people like the difference. So everyone, can see, okay, what does 4 stories look like? What does 5 stories look like? But I do see this as the start of the transition zone. And that's, the first pass at it. But we do need the Zoning Board of Appeals help with some of these conditions because this applicant filed a subdivision plan for a zoning freeze. So basically, we don't have, and obviously we can negotiate, and the applicant has been working with us, to move this project forward, but they have a zoning freeze regarding some of the affordable housing components at 10%, not at the 1, in the additional, 2% that we're requesting under the new zoning. And then the parking requirement, they filed a subdivision plan so they could be under the old, if they wanted to get this developed, be under the old parking requirement. And during our public hearings, we've heard issues with neighbors about overflow of parking in the neighborhood. So we do need the ZBA help on this, but getting back to your question on Waverly Street, that needs more citizen input. It needs public hearings. And, again, I need to provide data so people can make an informed decision.
Given each of these conditions, I think, at least personally, it would be interesting to see, some of them are a bit, I don't want to say ambiguous, but they leave a lot of room for interpretation. And it would be, I think, at least very valuable to me if the applicant could come back and say, okay, here is exactly the way we would answer each one of these 10 conditions. For condition 1, this is what we would do. So there's no ambiguity around each of the conditions and what the applicant would do to meet the conditions. And then whatever debate would ensue over whether there was sufficient or insufficient could happen.
All 10, I think he means, yeah.
He can't unmute himself.
Point, and I think that probably everybody would want to see that the language is, again, tightened up so that we make sure that it's an enforceable condition and that everybody understands what their responsibilities are on all of the conditions. So I think that's an important note when they come back with the red line, and then when we review what they do and make sure that we understand and have a clear understanding of the meaning of the conditions and how they would or could or should be enforced. I would encourage, if you're going to provide some kind of red line, that you do it at least with a few days or even longer, a week or so before the next meeting, so that we have a chance, so that I have a chance to find out that I haven't gotten it and then get it, and then everybody else has a chance to review it as well.
That makes sense.
That's my thought.
Yeah,